I'm very conscious that we're moving into what will be a difficult and emotive debate. And so just to take a moment to still ourselves, prepare ourselves, we're going to sing the song that we learned on Saturday. So Phil will lead us. Hopefully the words will come up on the screen for Holy Spirit.
Breath of Heaven, yeah. It's also on page 22 of your papers. Excellent. Let's just remain seated and we'll sing this through.
So we come to the joint report of the Theological Forum and the Faith Action Programme leadership team on assisted dying. The working group convener, John Ferguson.
Moderator, John Ferguson, 283. A few weeks ago, my uncle died peacefully in his sleep. He had lived an active life up until his death and had known relatively good health. He was still involved in his community and in his local church, and he celebrated his 90th birthday just a few days before he died. He went for an afternoon nap and didn't wake up. Of course, it was a terrible shock for my aunt and the family, but there's no doubt that if you are looking for a good way to die, this was it. And yet, for so many people, this is not the kind of death that they will experience. Dying today can be a very difficult experience, and although many people know pain relief through medication, some will still experience severe pain. And even when pain is relieved, there is still the fear of what lies ahead for many people who know that they are dying. That's a reminder that this is not simply an ethical issue that we can debate in an abstract manner, because death, of course, is something that we will all experience. The stories that we've heard in producing this report, the moving accounts that we've listened to in past assemblies in this hall, reminds us that the issue of assisted dying goes to the very heart of our emotional well-being, our spirituality, our relationships, our hopes and fears. It goes to the very heart of what it is to be a human being. And for Christians, all of this is set against the background of our faith in God. The first substantive section of our Deliverance recognizes this when we affirm that we are made in the image of God with inherent dignity and worth. And because of this, every human being should know dignity, respect, compassion, and love when they are dying. On this issue, that is something which unites all of us as a people of faith, whether we are in favor of legalizing assisted dying or not. The working group, which I've convened over these past 2 years, was asked to do something seemingly fairly simple by the General Assembly. The Deliverance asked us to explore the range of theological and ethical opinions on assisted dying within the Church and report to a future General Assembly. And that was it. We've done this by listening, consulting, and engaging in conversations with experts in this area, with other denominations, with relatives who have lost a loved one after a prolonged and difficult illness, and with every presbytery in the Church of Scotland. What we've learned over these past 2 years is that some in the Church are open to assisted dying being legalised, but they still have very serious concerns about it in practice, especially in relation to sufficient safeguards. We've learned that there are, of course, others who are completely against it, but also another group of people who are deeply unsure and have not come to a view. What became very clear to us is that there is no consensus on this matter within the Church. This report, therefore, seeks to offer the Church a theological, historical, and biblical reflection on the issues surrounding assisted dying. It seeks to be balanced, but we know that with an issue as emotive and challenging as this, some will say that we've not succeeded. We've sought to consult as many people as we could, but again, we know that there will be some who say that we should have consulted more. But throughout it all, we have carefully and respectfully listened to the wide range of views that exist across our church. In some respects, we've gone beyond our remit because, as the Deliverance shows, we felt it necessary to ask the Assembly to call on the Scottish Government to prioritise palliative care. And we also believe it to be important for the Church to make it clear that it's vital that robust safeguards are in place should assisted dying be legalised. And we're asking the Assembly to acknowledge that further resources and pastoral care training for the Church should be provided if it becomes legal. What we've not done, and we weren't asked to do, is to ask the Assembly to agree a binary position on either being in favour or against assisted dying. And as we make clear in our report, for many this may prove very difficult. Some may see it as essential that the Church speaks out one way or the other, that it has a duty to provide moral guidance that allows the Church to advocate for or against assisted dying to wider society and the government of the day. But one question that might be asked is this: why do we need to have a binary position? Who will benefit from it? Some will argue that we need it because we should be reflecting a biblical position, and yet, as our report makes clear, the Bible does not offer a clear and ambiguous view of all the nuances of this issue. From the sanctity of life to the teachings of Christ and loving one another, to the question of suicide, to the suggestion that we are playing at being God, arguments can be made on all sides in regard to these and other areas. Some may argue that we should adopt a binary position so that people might be influenced by it to adopt that position themselves. We don't agree. We do not believe that in this complex area, it's the duty of the Church to seek to persuade people to adopt a particular position one way or the other. Others will argue that a binary position is necessary so that we can say that the Church is speaking with one voice on this matter. And yet, we feel that we cannot say that with integrity because there are many voices across a spectrum of views on assisted dying within our church. We believe that if this deliverance is passed, then the church will have moved from a binary position on assisted dying to adopting a realistic, honest, and loving position which it can hold with integrity. While some may take the view that it will place the church in a position of neutrality, we don't agree. Rather, it would be a position in which we strongly affirm the validity of all the views held by church members on this issue, and we recognize their absolute right to hold these views. And we're not taking a neutral stance on the sanctity of human life, or the fact that we are made in the image of God, on our clear wish for safeguards to be built into the bill, and on our deep concerns about the lack of equitable funding for palliative care. Last week, the Scottish Parliament gave its assent to the general principles of the Assisted Dying Bill in Scotland. And the Church will need to advocate for the safeguards which are essential in ensuring that the intent of this legislation is adhered to. The Church must continue to advocate for improvements in access to palliative care and call strongly for the postcode lottery of access to this to be ended. The Church must also ensure that if this legislation is passed, that it provides clear guidelines for all involved in pastoral care. We will remain fully engaged in this issue, and any suggestion that we are going to be neutral, passive bystanders is fundamentally wrong. Moderator, any of you in the Assembly will know John Williams, who was presented last year with a certificate from the moderator for his 50 years of service to the General Assembly. John is terminally ill, and he asked if he could address the Assembly on this issue. And although John is not a commissioner, I wonder, moderator, if you might ask the General Assembly if they would allow John to speak on something which obviously means so much to him.
Absolutely. The Assembly would be delighted to hear from you, John.
Moderator, thank you. I feel in a way like Daniel being in the lion's den, somewhere I'd never thought I'd ever be speaking from, but you're all looking fairly contented and well-fed and quite sleepy, so I think I'm quite safe. First of all, let me say that I find the report that's been produced is absolutely excellent. I agree with 100% with what conclusions it's come to. And the conclusions it's reached are very much the 4 bullet points I had reached myself. Something is needed to be done in an ever more complex medical world, but in my personal opinion, this is not the way, and it's a bad bill. As the reporter said, it's open to abuse on so many levels and puts medical staff in an impossible position. What about those who've got a power of attorney? How do they deal with it? And I, having just learnt I have terminal cancer, have absolutely no idea how long I've got to live. My consultant looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and said, well, pick a number. So how would you even start to say that somebody has got a year left to live or 6 months left to live? I might as well just pick lottery balls or straws. Therefore, I can't support the bill, but I feel I'm in a terrible position. And this is why. I've been on dialysis now for 7 years. I will probably, with the type of dialysis I've got, live for another 3 or 4. I'm in the unique position of I'm the only person in the Western General who does his own treatment. I work the machines myself. I do all the nursing preparation. I do my own prescriptions. I run my treatment. I do my own bloods, etc., etc. In fact, I'm in control of how I manage my illness. And that word control for somebody is really important. It's a great way to do it. Now, it's become a lot harder recently because of the bone pain that's produced, because of loss of calcium due to renal failure. Nobody told me that palliative care was available to me right now. I thought palliative care was only in the last few weeks of my life, and I would see the hospice in the last few days. But that's not true. Because I'm on dialysis, and dialysis is, in some ways, a terminal illness, it's been available to me for a long time, but that's not been communicated to me, and that's a failure of the system. But it is available, and it's made a massive difference to me. Within a week of speaking to palliative care, I was on the medication that I needed to help myself keep going and to continue my treatment. If I had not got that medication, I would have had to stop dialysis, and I wouldn't be standing here now. The pain is measured on a score between 1 and 10. And I was sitting at about 8.5. I was sitting on the edge of my dialysis bed, sobbing in pain, crying into the machine, which was distressing for me, and it's distressing for staff. And they kept on saying, for goodness sake, get off the machine and go home. My reaction was, well, I need to do my treatment, or I've had it. So you're caught in that way. There are medical reasons why you would stop dialysis. They're quite complex, but the consultants can suggest it to you. But because dialysis is a treatment, I am in the position that it is my decision, not theirs, when I stop dialysis and to say, I've had enough, I wish to end it, and move to a position of palliative care. Now, stopping dialysis is not simple. It's not, oh, well, we'll give you a drug and you'll pass away. If you're a young and fit person, you will probably, if you stop dialysis, die within a fortnight. You'll become more and more tired and you'll slip away. If you're old and a crock like me, it could be 2, 3, 4 months. You'll live fairly well to begin with, and then gradually it will get more difficult. And that's something I've also got to find and live with. I don't need any reason to stop. I don't have to say, well, it's because my treatment isn't working. As long as I am not saying I want to stop because I'm fed up and depressed, my staff will support me and they will let me take that choice. Now, I've got my reasons set out with the team, and they understand what I want to do, and they are supporting me 100%. I could stop right now. I could go into dialysis tomorrow and say, I'm sorry, I've had enough. That's where I find myself. And as a patient, it's getting harder. I know a patient who was slightly older than myself, who was finding dialysis more and more difficult, but she stopped her dialysis because her terminal cancer, even with palliative care help, was more than she could bear. And she stopped and she slipped away peacefully. So you don't have to do it for a dialysis reason. And this is where I find myself in a horrible position. I was speaking to my renal medical psychologist who said to me that he knows people who envy dialysis patients. I'm going to say that again, envy us, because we can decide to stop our treatment, and they wished they were on dialysis so that they could stop living and die a dignified death. And that really hurt. It really hit me. What sort of people are we when we allow that to happen? So, palliative care. Palliative care means massive investment. I've been lucky that I have been in touch with the hospice for the last 3 or 4 months. They have got me on medication and on continually strong medication, which is working for me and will certainly allow me to keep going through my dialysis. And that's been fantastic. But it's a limited resource. There are not enough beds, there are not enough staff, there are not enough funding. And as far as I'm concerned, the way palliative care is funded here is a national disgrace. And the government really should do something much more about it to help all those who need it. I know people who have, in their 80s, have tried to cope for their husband who is in his 70s. They can't. They can't get a bed in the hospice. And they are struggling, trying to nurse them through the night because there's no care available. We really have, as a society, got to do an awful lot better than that. So I thank all the hospice team for all their help, because that's why I'm still here, and they'll phone me every week, and they'll make sure my meds are doing okay, and we will keep on increasing the doses to keep me right. So, what I wonder is, why do I have a choice and other people don't have a choice? I'm sure we all know people who are in a very bad situation. Maybe it's because of a brain degenerative disease or other things. Why have I got a choice, but not them? Now, would I take the option? I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I hope that God makes the decision so I don't have to. But I know that that option is there if I had to take it. Let me say, to try and finish off, in every case, there is a person, there is a family, there are their friends who will be struggling with a decision whether or not to end their life. And I tell you, that is the hardest decision you can make. I think about it all the time, because I've got that way to go myself. It's not easy. And those of you who follow me on Facebook will know the struggle I've had with that. And I thank those on Facebook who have prayed for me. It has been a wonderful thing to have, and that support has been absolutely incredible. It can tear families apart. It really is very difficult trying to care for a terminally ill person at home with all the medical kit all over the place, being disruptive and being hard on everyone of the family. It can be hard on your partner or your wife or husband, who may not be medically trained, but has to try and care for you when they are completely out of their comfort zone. And a lot of the time, what we need in all of this is to be able to share things with people. Talking to family isn't always the best option. They're too close. But talking to somebody else, talking to somebody outside, maybe your minister, your elder, your friend, someone who you can share your thoughts with, that is really very important. So here's the challenge. If I said to any of you, I'm facing this dilemma in what I do, I'd really like to talk, what would you do? Would you say, well, I'd love to have a chat with you, but I've got to go and make the tea? Or would you say, oh, well, doing that is not really my thing, I'm not really comfortable? Or to quote a biblical story, would you see me coming and pass by on the other side of the road? Or would you say, let's go and have a coffee, chat to me. You talk and I'll listen. That can be so massively encouraging. Just the act of being able to talk to somebody. Maybe you would want to pray with a person. Maybe not. Some people are good at that, some are not. But all of us can sit in silence for a few minutes together and care for one another. And then, please make sure you keep in touch with the person. Maybe just a text, a phone call, a message. How are you doing? That is so important for a person's morale. If we as a church together can't sit with people who are really struggling with all of this and spend time with them at the most difficult time of their life, what is it saying about us as Christians and about us as a church? Therefore, pastoral care training for everybody is so essential. It doesn't have to be complex training. It can just start as a simple thing of how to listen to people. So let's start there. Oh, and by the way, it's perfectly all right to cry. By golly, I know that one. So I support the report 100%. Respect to everybody, a fit-for-purpose bill, better palliative care, and pastoral care training for all of us. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
John, on behalf of the Assembly, can I just say thank you. Thank you for sharing so openly, so honestly, and helping us to understand a little bit of your life and what you're going through at the moment. And I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone when I say, please be assured of our prayers going forward for you. And if you've got a Facebook page, I'm sure other people will start following you as well, just so we can keep up with your journey. But thank you. Much appreciated.
Moderator, in presenting this report, I'd like to thank the other members of the working group for all the time and energy they've given to this work, and to all those whom we have consulted, including all of our presbyteries. Thank you for your willingness to share with such honesty and openness your stories on bereavement, on death and life, on faith and doubt. Thank you for being willing to share your fear of the dying process, and on sometimes saying with deep integrity, I simply don't know what to believe when it comes to assisted dying. Thank you for allowing us to offer the Assembly today the opportunity to affirm all of the views held with integrity on assisted dying by the people of God. Moderator, I present the report and move the deliverance.
Is it seconded? We have a number of questions. So we'll take questions to the convener. First of all, the comments, they'll come when we turn to the actual deliverance itself. So I have notice of 3 questions. So Philip Wright, first of all, and if Scott Burton and Richard Buckley could be on standby. Philip is online.
Philip Wright, 175. Moderator, thank you to the working group for all the hard work that has been put into this report. I'd like to turn to section 12.3 of the report. The first sentence there reads as follows: the fact that there are as yet no examples from the international community where a jurisdiction has expanded eligibility criteria, where it was initially restricted to terminal illness, does not, of course, guarantee that it could not happen. There are two its in that statement, and my question is, what does the first it refer to?
Moderator, thank you for the question. The first it is referring to eligibility criteria.
Is that enough of an explanation for the questioner?
Thank you for that. Could I courteously suggest that it should read they were rather than it was then?
Happy to accept that. Obviously, we can't rewrite the report, but certainly that would be a much better way of phrasing it. So I'm happy to accept that from the Commissioner. But we cannot change the report.
But you're affirming that that's really the understanding behind it?
Yes, correct, Moderator. Thank you.
Excellent. So we move to the second question from Scott Burton.
Scott Burton, number 206. Thank you, Moderator. Convener, I feel that you were very clear in your speech that this report and the deliverances would change our position as a church. But my question was to clarify that, if that was the case, that if we agree this as a church, this will change us from our current position against assisted dying. And as such then, a follow-on question, if I may, is why Deliverance 4 is not clearer in making that conclusion to the church, that we are changing from the current position if we go on to accept these deliverances. Thank you, Moderator.
Moderator, the position of the Church of Scotland for the past 2 years has been to continue to be opposed to assisted dying, while accepting that we are reviewing our position. If we were to accept Section 4, we are saying that this would change the Church's position, and we have taken legal advice about that, whereby we would be embracing all sides of the argument and accepting the integrity of all those who have a varied range of views on assisted dying. I accept that it could have been clearer. We could have used the word affirm, for example, but that's a deliverance, that's a section that we have produced, and I am saying to the Assembly that this would mean a change to the Church's position on assisted dying.
Thank you. And Richard Buckley, who is...
A155 moderator online. If I can ask a question about the conclusion of the report, 14.5, which finds positive theological support for diversity and doesn't find diversity a weakness. If I can explain my concern that to the Sadducees, Jesus said, the reason you're wrong is that you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. And Jesus spoke to the Pharisees, you have a fine way of setting aside the commandments of God to establish traditions of men. And we see diversity as not a weakness. The problem that I find is twofold. Scripture no longer is supreme rule in matters of life and faith. We decide for ourselves, as opposed to taking it to the bar of Scripture by which we decide conflicting opinions. And perhaps we even go so far as to agree with those who mock the Bible as being full of contradictions. Can a kingdom divided against itself convene a stand?
There's no question that everybody in this debate takes the Bible seriously. And the problem, though, is that, as we try to show in the report, the Bible is very nuanced on this subject. The Bible is not clear on assisted dying, and people do make different interpretations. And so that's why we're saying that diversity is something to be welcomed. We are saying that it's not possible to take a position on assisted dying based on the Bible that everybody can emphatically agree on.
Thank you, convener. There are no further requests to ask questions, so we move then to the deliverance and receive the report. There are a large, and received online as well. There are a large number of comments, so if I just give the names of the first three that we'll take, Julia Pizzuto-Pamaco, and then Christine Collier, and then Scott Burton.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you for allowing me to address the Assembly. First of all, I want to thank the committee Sorry, my name, Julia Pizzuto-Pamaco, and my number is 343. Apologies. First of all, I want to thank the working group for all of their hard work. It was really clear that you spent a lot of time listening, and certainly with the road shows and all of the time that you put presenting the different perspectives. We're very much appreciate it. I appreciate it that you affirm the dignity and worth of every human being, which is definitely one of our perspectives as Christians. You reaffirm the need to care for the most vulnerable, to advocate for palliative care, which I can say in the Northeast is deplorable, something that we never had an advantage to have in my situation with my husband. You talked about robust safeguards, should assisted dying become legal, pastoral care, which we all need to learn from, and being trained in that, which is wonderful. The different perspectives that are all represented in the Church of Scotland, and of course, opening up the discussion of death and dying. And I very much appreciate all of that, so thank you. However, there were a few things that I wanted to address. Did not see as much theology in regards to a particular aspect that I was concerned about. Particularly felt that theological reflection was missing in the section 9 on suffering. In the report, we have read about personal autonomy, bodily autonomy, and the right to die a dignified death. However, I see nowhere, but please correct me if I'm wrong, because I very well might have missed it, a theology of the cross and value that can be found in enduring suffering. It's mentioned, but no theologians are listed, but there are in other places theologians talked about, but none list or expand upon it. Jesus did die an undignified death, a cruel and a painful death. We too suffer throughout our lives, whether it be mental health issues, addiction, drink and drugs, natural disasters, broken relationships, or when a loved one dies and we are left bereaved. So many ways we go through pain and suffering in life. No one is immune to it. Liberation theologians such as Gutierrez and Gonzalez argue for an understanding of suffering, even a sense of God-forsakenness, and a way of helping us understand the heart of God even more. Henry Nouwen in Can You Drink the Cup writes, "Drinking the cup of life is fully appropriating and internalizing our unique existence with all its sorrows and joys. It's not easy to do this, but as we gradually come to befriend our own reality, to look with compassion at our own sorrows and joys, as we are able to discover the unique potential of our way of being in the world, we can move beyond our protest, put the cup of our life to our lips, and drink it slowly, carefully, but fully." Life is messy, filled with joy, but also with great pain. But we do serve a sovereign God, and in that we acknowledge that there are many things we do not understand. Part of the balm of healing is to know that Jesus suffered in our world as well, and that he lived in the muck of humanity, facing great pain and rejection and even God-forsakenness. And so I do question in this theological discussion where we as his followers can pick up his cross and follow him. And so as I finish, because it's time to finish, I say to you that we need to vote our consciousness, because I recognize there are many different views, but that I feel that there's more theological discussion that needs to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Christine, and then Scott Burton.
Christine Collier, 427. I'm a probationer in the Scots Kirk, Lausanne, training for OLM and to serve in the soon-to-be linkage of Geneva and Lausanne. At the introductory Zoom call for the Church's reflection on assisted dying, we were encouraged to offer our perspectives from across the Church, including the International Presbytery, so I welcome that invitation. As someone observing from outside Scotland, I believe our global vantage point offers a helpful and perhaps hopeful lens, especially when we consider how assisted dying operates in other countries. And you mentioned you did speak to all presbyteries. I'm not actually aware of what happened in the International Presbytery, and I don't know if you spoke to congregations who are in countries where assisted dying has been in place for some years. I don't know that, but that's what I am drawing on today. This response draws particularly on the experience of Switzerland, where assisted suicide has been legal for decades. Switzerland provides a well-established example of what happens when assisted dying becomes a sustained part of medical and legal practice. But crucially, Switzerland operates within a privately funded, insurance-based healthcare system, very different from Scotland's public NHS. That contrast raises important questions about ethics, access, and unintended consequences that are essential to our conversation. Switzerland offers a long-standing case of assisted suicide within a legal framework that permits it under Article 115 of the Penal Code, as long as there are no selfish motives. Importantly, euthanasia, active killing, is still illegal. In 2021, assisted suicide made up nearly 2% of all deaths in Switzerland. This reflects an 11% rise in 1 year and a 44% rise since 2015. Meanwhile, non-assisted suicides have remained stable. These figures include a growing normalisation of assisted dying. The Church of Scotland's concerns about the slippery slope, a slow shift in how society views life and suffering, are not unfounded. What begins as an exception may gradually become a norm. In Switzerland, assisted dying is delivered not through the state, but by private organisations such as Dignitas and Exit. These groups offer support for a fee, typically between 7,000 and 11,000 euros, not Swiss francs, euros. Foreign nationals, including hundreds of Britons, have travelled to Switzerland for this service. This raises a major concern. Access is limited by financial means. Assisted dying in this context becomes a service you must pay for. The Swiss experience shows that even when organisations are non-profit, there is a market around death. Scotland's NHS model is entirely different. If assisted dying becomes legal here, would it be funded by public money? That's surely not 5 minutes, is it? Free! Okay, you may see me at the interval, at the coffee break, if you would like to know more. My conclusion, if I may, is the Church calls for humility, empathy, theological integrity. If open space for genuine disagreement while maintaining a shared community to compassion, Switzerland's experience provides a cautionary lens. It reveals how assisted dying can become routine, transactional, and unequal. While some may see this as acceptable within a private healthcare model, its translation into Scotland's public system raises unique challenges. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. We move to Scott Burton and then Jesse Manuroko, Colin Sinclair, Anna Pizzuto-Pamako. Scott Burton.
Scott Burton, number 206. Thank you, moderator. As other speakers have said before, we recognise the great depth of work that the working group have given and giving of your time. But I am disappointed with your report. Not because necessarily of the conclusions, but because of the structure of your report. On the surface, it looks like a fair report in that you give some of the two sides, the two perspectives. However, I find it to be balanced when it's read from did I say biased, when I read it from where I stand. In every section where the argument is looked at for or against assisted dying, every single section ends positively for assisted dying. Everyone. There's not a single section where the last word is given in favor against assisted dying. There is an inherent bias that I don't think you have seen, and possibly because you are very strongly in favor of assisted dying. Your original Deliverance was to explore such views and opinions, not to advocate for such views and opinions. And I feel you have been biased. When you quote theologians, you do not give one single quote, as far as I can see, in favor of maintaining the current position, but you will quote again and again in favor of changing the position. And when you look at the language used, I draw your attention to 9.1.5, for example. The central question here is, do we mar the image of God by ending human life prematurely? But where does the emotive words come in favor of assisted dying? Because the sentence goes on, do we mar the image of God by ending human life prematurely, or by denying someone with a terminal illness suffering a particularly undignified death the opportunity to hasten their own death? You could drop out a particularly undignified death, and the sentence would still read fine, but those three words skew the argument the other way. And if we are not mindful of that, we can just read this report and think all is well, and this is a balanced report, and clearly assisted dying is okay. But it's not. And I feel that this is biased and skewed. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Scott. Convener?
Moderator, just in response to that, well, first of all, the working group had a range of views on assisted dying within it, so it's not true to say that the working group is in favour of assisted dying, and I think it's important to make that clear. We did start with the traditional view each time, and then we offered the alternative, the potential new interpretations that people might make to the traditional view, but we did seek to conclude with how both views can be held with integrity. So I would dispute the claim that the report is biased. It may not be as balanced as many people would wish. Sometimes achieving balance on a subject as complicated as this is not easy, but we certainly sought to be balanced, and we certainly would not accept that the report is in any way biased.
Thank you, Convener. Jesse, and then Colin and Anna.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Jesse. I come from Kenya, representing the General Assembly. When the convener started to talk, he started by noting the death of the relative, and as I stand here, I also condole with our General Assembly moderator, whose wife passed on 3rd this month, and also praying for him because they sent me on his behalf. Moderator, as I stand here, I serve with the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, the immigrants who came all the way from Kenya to UK in London, and 90% of these members whom I serve are beneficiaries of Scottish theology. And we know that the Scottish Church arrived in Kenya in 1991. They came up with 3 pillars: the gospel, education, and the health. The 90% of my members are serving in NHS and also in those homes that we are having people who are living at the end. They are assisting the dying. So as we are also looking at this aspect, moderator, I was thinking that life is like a relay race, where you are given a baton to run after one has run. And in the 2023, this is the theological desk which was given this assignment to go and think how to go about it. I want to say that when we preach the gospel, and you talked so well about love, if we go out with that love, we are able to take care of our dear ones. The church in Kenya appreciate the commitment that the church in Scotland brought in our country. Today, as we are speaking, we have 3 big hospitals. We have training schools on health. And that's why we find ourselves coming into this country to serve humanity, because service to God, service to humanity is service to God. We are holding and we are appreciating the theological desk or the forum that is being given mandate. And as we are also seeing how they are going about, I want to believe that we have a lot to do. And as we are looking forward to work with you, I want to assure this General Assembly that the PCA Christians who live here and also home are beneficiaries of what you have given back to Kenya. So I'm so happy knowing very well that we are being commanded and sent out by the Gospel of Matthew to go out and make disciples. These disciples, some are the ones dying in illness, and some are very strong as we are supposed to reach them out. I'm happy to say that when we are doing this, it is a command from the Lord. It is important, it is fulfilling, satisfying, exciting, and rewarding. Thank you so much, moderator, and the Assembly for listening to me.
Thank you. Colin Sinclair, then Anna and Louise Mackay, and then we will return to the Deliverance.
Thank you, moderator. Sinclair, 63. I wish I was. Thank you so much for your report. This is an issue that matters because it's life-changing. And thank you, too, for focusing on theological issues, which is the area that the church can contribute to the broader debate. But I want to suggest there might be one area of theology that was missing from your report, although it was implicitly in it. And that is what the Scots Confession and the Westminster Confession both devote a chapter to, which is just the reality of human sin and the power within. And the reason I raise it is because you and John both raised the importance of necessary safeguards. But it seems to me from my own heart that safeguards cannot simply be done in paper. So we point out the issue of coercion that could be a danger, whether innocently or deliberately, whether by the family or the NHF or by politicians. We talk about the danger of creep, that once you start to change, could things slip over time, leading us to conclusions we do not want to reach. We talk about cutting corners because we need to save time and money, because safeguards that were drawn up by one generation become irksome and burdensome and costly in the next, and so they disappear. And so the question is, will any safeguard be safe? My theological professor next door used to talk about sin's irrationality and its absurdity. And it is its irrationality that does make it open to reasoned argument and leads us to the situation that Paul talked about, where he is torn in two. The good he wants to do, he doesn't do, and the evil he doesn't want to do, he does. It leads Jesus to be unwilling to trust himself to the people because he knew what was in them. and about how when after the feeding of the 5,000 they wanted to make him king by force, he withdrew from them. He recognized that even in the best of us, there can also be a shadow side. And here's a situation, and I'll bring this to a conclusion because it's a long debate. Here is a situation where, of course, like everyone else, I care with compassion. Like everyone else, I want to minimize suffering. But there is also behind me, in my worst moments, a shadow voice, the time I'm spending looking after a loved one, the way that that money spent in a care home could be used for my children. And normally these voices can be suppressed and the best and the highest voice can be heard. But I just wonder if assisted dying was made legal, would that give oxygen to that shadow voice and give it ammunition that I do not want it to have, because I care for the life of every individual. As any minister here, I have been with people in their dying days, good and bad, and with my family. And I simply want to say that in our theological thinking, let's not forget the power of the power within. Thank you.
Anna Pizzuto-Pomako.
Anna Pizzuto-Pomako, number 536. Thank you, moderator, and thank you to the working group for the immense amount of work that you've done on this report. The nature of this debate thus far has been understandably polarizing, but I believe that it's this polarizing nature that hasn't been particularly helpful. It's not provided us a framework for this discussion, and particularly for the pastoral implications. This debate has been intensely personal, and I do want to recognize the really deep personal and emotional cost that's come with so many people sharing so many of their stories. So I can only thank everyone who's spoken thus far and who will speak today. This isn't easy. You will have heard just a few minutes ago my mum speak on this issue and speak a little bit about our family's experience. And I do want to preface that what I'm about to say is mine. I haven't even told my mum what I'm about to say, and I think I might be just a little bit more scared for her to hear it than any of the rest of you. So nearly 5 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with MND, which is a terminal, progressive, and really dehumanizing disease. And from that point, I had to watch, along with the rest of my family, as my dad lost his abilities. And it got to the point where I didn't even really recognize the parent who'd raised me. And a year and a half later, he did die. So I was left asking what it might mean to cling to a really good God in the midst of witnessing such suffering. Now, I'm not telling you this to evoke sympathy or to make you shift kind of uncomfortably in your seat, but so often as a young person, I've been told that my opinion on matters like this aren't valid because I'm young and I'm inexperienced with grief. I'm telling you my experience partially because this isn't the case for me, but it's also not the case for so many young people in our country and in our churches. Because of this experience, and despite research that I've engaged in, I truly find myself stuck in the middle. I truthfully do not know which position, if any, I'll ever really be able to take. And so I wonder, and I kind of assume, that some of you might find yourselves in this position, caught between these two sides and faced with what might seem like an impossible decision. And I feel like there's been little mention through the debates and through this report of this position, of people who might find themselves in the middle. I do appreciate the acknowledgements that have happened thus far, but I feel that they've been inadequate. I think that there's something sacred about this middle space, and I believe that it's particularly in this middle place, in this space of unknowing, in this place of debating ourselves, that Jesus meets us. Now, of course, God can meet us anywhere. But I think that God seeks to meet us particularly when we're caught in the middle, because we're torn, because we're unsure, because we must rely on God to hold us up. So I think as an assembly, we need to commit to bearing witness to the stories of those people who are caught in the middle, the voices that aren't the most loudly heard. So I'm not going to argue for or against the report, but rather I'm going to ask you all to consider how we as a church might bear witness to these experiences, to the people who are grappling with these questions in the midst of their everyday lives. So I've offered my perspective to encourage you all that as we continue in this debate, in what will be a really emotional and polarizing debate, to remember this middle ground and this middle position. How do we minister to those who find themselves in the middle? Because many will. And it's up to us to bear witness to that sacred place. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise Mackay.
Louise Mackay, number 216. Moderator, Benjamin Franklin famously said there are two certainties in life, taxes and death, and I'm sure we are familiar with at least one, if not both of these. It's almost the first anniversary of my father's death, the end point of a 2-year journey which began with the amputation of one of his legs. Many of you here will have many lived experiences of dealing with life-limiting disabilities and illnesses, either yourself or someone close to you. His life changed within a day, as did that of our whole family. And what struck me is how much of an undisabled-friendly society we live in. For an example, he could no longer visit my manse, a can of worms I won't open today, but a fact. Even finding a safe place across the road from one pavement to another became something out of a Mission Impossible film at times. Friends, fellow church members, and other Christians drifted away, unsure of how to act or what to say following the amputation. While the burden word may not have been said, I'm almost sure it was internalized by him. A sense of being cast aside, unwanted by society, of no use anymore. This has led me to ponder at what point would assisted dying have come up subtly or even diplomatically in a conversation. Would it have been during his 7-month difficult stay in hospital? An almost 80-year-old man with one leg draining precious NHS resources. In fact, a do not resuscitate order had actually been put in place without his consent or our family's knowledge. Would it be suggested when he was to reflect on the changes to his whole life and the impact of his wife of 50 years becoming his carer, a role which I know many of you will be familiar with? Or perhaps it should be contemplated when knowing life was not going to get any better. It would just be a slow and steady decline of 2 years. But what I would say is that in those 2 years, despite us knowing the final outcome, I still saw the love and grace of God in my father and in our family. Prayers answered, perhaps not in the way we fully wanted, but prayers said during a long night answered. Prayers that if the road had been different, could never have been answered. Is there a danger that we block God's work? I understand that assisted dying is to give autonomy and freedom to those facing an uncertain and painful future ahead of them, something I hugely empathize with. But my fear is that if proper safeguards are not put in place, many who feel themselves cast aside by the world may feel they are a burden to society, a burden to their family and loved ones, a burden to the NHS, which we constantly hear is close to breaking, and is a step they should take for the greater good. Those who are vulnerable and fragile may feel it's the best for everyone around them. As a church, as followers of Christ, my hope and prayer is that we are emboldened even more to stand with, speak out for, and protect those who feel cast aside by society, that we demonstrate the unconditional, extravagant love of God in whose image we are made, and that no one is ever cast aside by God, no matter how old, how fragile a body or mind may be, and no matter how many limbs one may have.
Thank you. I'm very conscious a lot of this debate is very emotive. I think going forward, I know we all want to clap, but I think maybe probably just to respect a little bit of silence after each contribution rather than a clapping. It doesn't mean we don't value it, but it just makes it probably easier for us to move forward. So we move to section 2 of the Deliverance. Do we approve? Is there someone wanting to speak? Oh, right, it's just come now. Yeah, it has just come through. Right, Robbie, yes, if you would like to make a comment.
Moderator Robbie Hamilton, 127. Looking at these words, affirmation, dignity and worth. And for me, 3 other concepts came in when I was thinking about these in the report. And that's to do with care, firstly, with choice, and with the concept of children of God. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. And the outlook didn't look very good. And I'm not telling a story to make your emotions run high. I want to bring out 3 important facts in consideration of this report. First thing is to do with care, because 17 years before my diagnosis, my father was diagnosed with the same. And it was horrendous. And so it does matter that we put in the report to say that it is horrendous and that it is difficult when people go through these kinds of illnesses. But what I want to say is the care in 17 years changed so much. It wasn't an easy journey to have treatment, major surgery, and then treatment, but it was so much better than my dad 17 years before. So we've got to recognise that palliative care has come on leaps and bounds, but it's a postcode lottery, because we've heard stories today already where palliative care has not been good. Where I was, palliative care was exceptional. But that's not always the case. We have to take that into consideration. Choice. We heard something about choice, and this is about choice at the end of life. John spoke greatly about choice in the midst of treatment, but people have to make choices at the start of the cancer journey as well. Please don't forget that either. I was taken into a room without any windows, sat down with a doctor and told that I had cancer of the esophagus, and he said, there's 2 routes for you. There's the curative route, there's the palliative route. At that point, I had to make a choice. So it's not just at the end, it's not just in the midst, it's also at the beginning of the journey that many people have to make a choice about what road they're going to go down. Children of God. The doctor gave me all the statistics, and the statistics scared the life out of me, because he told me how many folk survived the treatment, how many folk survived the surgery, how many folk survived the whole of the journey. And that made me really think, which choice am I going to make? And I spoke to a friend whose brother was a consultant oncologist. And I told him, I said, well, only X amount, only 20% of people get beyond 2 years with cancer of the esophagus. And he said, remember, you're not a statistic. You're Robbie Hamilton. And if you know me, you know what that means. You are not. Let's not forget, in the midst of all this, and I'm one of these, and I do not have a bias, because I have a very sore backside on this one, sitting on the fence. But let's not forget, this is not about statistics. This is about people. This is about the people of God, the children of God, who are loved by us and loved by God.
Thank you, Robbie Hamilton. So we move to section 2 as in the print. Do we approve? That's a yes in the hall and a yes online. We have a new section 3 in the name of Philip Wright, in the name of Eileen Miller.
Thank you, Moderator. New section 3 in the name of Eileen Miller. Affirm our belief in God with us in life and at the end of life, and the gift of the resurrection as contained in the Book of Confessions. First time we've used that, just thought I'd note it.
Eileen, I ask you to speak to this.
Thank you, Moderator. Eileen Miller, number 257. These words that I want to add in are probably so obvious you wonder why I'm even suggesting it, but I think it's really important. I think we need to be explicit about the bigger picture, the overarching context of our faith when we're discussing life and death issues. And I really do thank the committee, the Theological Forum and FAPLT for the work that they've done and the research they've done. I think our faith, whether we are for assisted dying, whether we're against assisted dying, whether we're in the middle, we can probably all agree in these words about God with us in life at the end of life and the gift of the resurrection as contained in the Book of Confession. God with us in our living and our dying, and the gift of the resurrection. This is the basis of our hope, hope in suffering, hope in difficult times, hope in the good times, hope that God is with us, and especially at the end of our lives. And that sure and certain hope that death is not the end. You know, I'm quite new to putting in motions, so I've had to seek some advice about this. And the first one I put in, I spoke with the committee about, and I accepted that there was duplication in what I was saying in deliverances that were already contained. But they came back with a question, and that question was, what do you mean by the word eternally? Because I had put in the value of each person throughout their life and eternally. Now that question got me thinking about what is it and why am I uneasy with the report? So I searched through the report again another 2 or 3 times to see if I could find any direct references to the hope of the resurrection in the report, and I couldn't. Now, perhaps the convener will correct me on that. I have asked others to look, and we've come a blank. And I think the words should be in. They should certainly be in. And I think they certainly should be in at this time when there's so much focus on this particular issue in wider society in Scotland with the bill that is going through to the next stage. Otherwise, what distinguishes the church from any other group? We have a hope of resurrection. Now, parish ministers and others walk in support with those who are close to death and their families. And others here, as we've heard spoken already, have experience of that too, of loved ones dying. As a healthcare chaplain, I've worked in a hospice, I've sat at bedsides, I've witnessed the struggles and pain. Finding hope or holding on to hope makes a big difference in even the most awful circumstances, as we've heard others share. Desmond Tutu once said, hope is being able to see that there's light despite all the darkness. And so I would ask you to vote for this new motion.
Convener, are you willing to accept it?
Moderator, happy to accept this motion. We do refer to death as not being the final word, but I accept that the word resurrection isn't there. But at the end of the day, it's the deliverance that really matters, and it's good that we would then have resurrection in our deliverance.
I should say, is it seconded? Excellent. We have comments from 2 folks, so Michael Stewart and then Mark McEwen. If something's been said before, please do not say it again. Time is limited. Not stop you speaking, but take that on board. So, Michael.
My laptop's not speaking to me, moderator.
Do you want us to move to Mark McEwen and give you a minute?
Yes, please.
So, Mark, if you could speak now. He's online. Hey. Mark. You're muted. Mm-hmm. I think you're still muted.
Just moderator, first time speaking. Mark McEwen, 169 Moodiesburn Parish Church. Moderator is simply to reaffirm what Eileen said. I'll keep it brief. But this is our distinctive voice in the debate, a voice which is different from many people that speak into the debate, where we can speak about not just time, but eternity, where we can speak not just about dignity in dying, but in hope of an everlasting life, which we find in Jesus Christ. And I think the deliverance is strengthened by affirming this in Eileen's new section. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Mark. Michael, have you managed to?
There is life after death, moderator.
Brilliant.
Michael Stewart, 275. Again, I'd like to thank the convener and the forum for a very thoughtful and measured report. But in the pagan Roman Empire, there was also a forum. And there were two groups, Roman citizens and slaves. Slaves were the chattels of Roman citizens and could be dealt with as their owners wished. They could be killed or even sexually abused with little or no criticism from their fellow citizens. We have to realize that the majority of input to MPs and MSPs on this issue comes from those who had no belief in life after death. When Christians became a significant proportion in the Roman Empire, they showed themselves to be very different, both in their sexual mores and their attitude to legally accepted laws. Indeed, there was much antagonism from those whose lives had been lived in the unquestioned arrangements. Are we prepared at this time in 2024 to be that different message? Similarly, the Jewish authorities at the time of Jesus hated him because he broke their long-held laws on such issues as the Sabbath. When Jesus was asked whether people should pay taxes to Rome, he asked for a coin and said, "Whose image is on that coin?" "Caesar," they replied. Then Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." The convener of the first deliverance on Saturday, and indeed of this deliverance, referred to us being made in the image of God. I'm not a man with no compassion, having lost a mother and a father-in-law, who both would fall into the category of no longer having any decent quality of life. I've also searched loud and long to my own attitudes to my own death. I have survived colon cancer, prostate cancer, third-degree burns, falling down 30 stairs, and ME. And I'm only 82, so I've got a number of lives left, moderator. It would seem to me that in agreeing with the secular authorities that men and women can usurp God's authority to end the life of another, we are rendering to Caesar things which scriptures tell us are God's remit. You will all have heard the arguments in favor of assisted dying, and it's not the place for me to rehearse these again. I would just ask you all to turn your eyes to the man on the cross. And in your prayers and decisions, ask him for his view on the fact that we, a part of his body, are considering supporting legislation which would allow taking the lives of us, his priceless images, into our own hands.
Thank you. Convener.
Can I just briefly clarify that we are not advocating supporting the legislation that's going through Parliament, just to make that clear.
Thank you. So we come to this new section 3. The convener has indicated that he's willing to accept it. Is the Assembly willing to accept? That's yes in the room and yes online. So we have another new section 3. I'll get I'm going to do it again, the convener. Sorry, I'll get Fiona to read it.
Thank you, moderator. Right, it is. Okay, so what's happening here? This is in the name of Philip Wright, and there's 3 parts. And we're going to vote on each 3 separately, but Philip has agreed that he's not, that doesn't mean he gets, what's 3 threes, 9 minutes. He's only going to speak for 3 minutes on all 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Beginning to start doubting myself. So I'm going to read each of them out, but we will vote on them separately. And Neil's nodding to me. That's great. So the first section of this new section 3 in Philip Wright's name is recognise that the proposed assisted dying bill in Scotland defines terminal illness as an advanced and progressive disease. illness or condition which they cannot recover from and which is expected to cause their premature death, and that this includes conditions such as multiple sclerosis and cystic fibrosis, where life expectancy may be many years long. The next section of Deliverance recognised that in 2016, Canada passed federal legislation allowing eligible adults to request medical assistance in dying. However, in 2021, the eligibility criteria were widened to include those whose death is not considered reasonably foreseeable. And the third section is recognise the statement of the Glasgow Disability Allowance. GDA members were outspoken in a groundswell of opposition to assisted dying when it was previously debated in Holyrood in 2015. Our resistance has only strengthened then. Since then. Thank you, moderator.
Is there a seconder to all three of these sections? Yep. Colin Sinclair.
Colin Sinclair, 63. Sorry, just a simple question. I don't quite understand how these are deliverances. I keep waiting for a so. Do they stand alone as they are? I just don't get it. Sorry.
They're each section, and we're saying that each section is so it's asking the General Assembly to recognise that.
So it's just that we are recognising information rather than...
I appreciate that. Thank you, Colin.
Is the convener willing to accept? No. Okay, so I will ask Philip to speak to this.
Right, 175. Thank you, moderator. Assembly has just affirmed that we're all made in the image of Almighty God with inherent dignity and worth. Before that, earlier today, we adopted the theology of disability in the report of the Assembly trustees. Given that, I'm proposing this new section 3 to help reflect some of the views of people with disabilities about assisted dying and the impact of the proposed Scottish Bill on them. I can't come to this assembly in person because I have caring responsibilities for one of our sons. He has a disability. Our experience of parents is that it's exceptionally hard and sometimes impossible to get the support that he needs. And that is a common story for so many people with disabilities, waiting years for support or not receiving it at all. And as we've already heard in this debate, that's the context in which assisted dying is being discussed. It's one in which we as a society are failing tens of thousands of people with disabilities. So part 1 of the Deliverance describes the scope of the proposed Scottish Bill. Section 10.4 of the report states that the bill is restricted to people with a terminal illness and a short life expectancy. Section 12.1 repeats that claim. But if you have a diagnosis, for example, of multiple sclerosis or cystic fibrosis and have a life expectancy of many years, you fall within the scope of the bill. The bill defines terminal illness as an advanced and progressive disease which is expected to cause premature death, but that could be many years away. The bill is not restricted to people with a short life expectancy. Part 2 is intended to clarify the introductory statement in section 12.3. That suggests that no country has expanded eligibility criteria for assisted dying, where these criteria started off for terminal illness alone. But the Canadian government website says that in 2016, Canada allowed eligible adults whose death was considered reasonably foreseeable to request medical assistance in dying. Before that, it was not allowed. Then in 2021, in response to legal challenge, Canada widened eligibility criteria. And this matters because it's a major reason why so many people with disabilities are scared by the proposed bill in Scotland. They know that eligibility criteria are bound to widen when challenged by equality legislation. Part 3 of the new section, the committee has consulted with various individuals, but to the best of my knowledge, none of the people in Appendix A is there because they have a disability or because they represent people with disabilities. Part 3 of the new section is an opportunity for us to say we're listening to what groups of people with disabilities are saying, and we hear what one group in particular is saying, the Glasgow Disability Alliance, with over 5,500 members. I urge Assembly to recognise what people with disabilities in Scotland are saying about assisted dying and about the proposed bill, and support this amendment.
Thank you, Philip. Joe Austin is wishing to make a comment.
Josephine Austin, 426. I just wanted to make a comment on the wording in the middle of part A, where it talks about a disease or whatever which they cannot recover from. May I remind the General Assembly that we believe in an all-powerful God. As Christians, we believe in miracles. God may heal somebody from a terminal illness, he may not, but he has the power to do so. As Christians, I would think that we could never say someone cannot recover. Obviously, we have rendered to Caesar and rendered to us. We can't say that on behalf of other people, but as Christians, thank you.
I think the convener wishes to clarify what...
Just to clarify, Moderator, to be fair to the Commissioner who's put forward the counter-motion, this is a quote from the legislation, so this is not the Commissioner's view, so I think that's important to recognise.
Okay, thank you. There are no other requests to speak, so... you've put in a request, but it's not coming up.
We need the request for all three at the same time, Neil.
Okay, Brian Kerr first of all, and then... I think we're taking all the sections together.
Thank you, Moderator. Sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for that. Moderator Kerr, 212. I understand, and I must admit, I share Colin Sinclair's concern about agreeing statements in Deliverance. My worry is that in recognising the statement of one group, we are not recognising the views of many others as well. And just like any part of society, it's true to say that there are a wide variety of views in the disabled community as well. And I think this would be entirely at odds with the report in taking a view that there are different opinions. If, as the convener said, part of the important thing is the language in the Deliverance, that we suddenly go in on what one group say over another. And for that reason, I would certainly, for Part C, urge Assembly to resist this. But to be honest, for all of this new section, I have concerns and would urge Assembly to resist.
Thank you. We still don't have up on screen the request to speak. So, Mr. Pearson, so speaking from up here. So, your name and number.
Douglas Pearson, 244, Uddingston Burnhead Parish Church. I have had MS for 40 years. I've had remission. I've had bad times. But I would never think of anything like this at the end. I've suffered quite a bit over the years, but I've always fought it. I got told by a consultant when I get diagnosed that I had a degenerative disease of the nervous system and it would kill me. And I'd be in a wheelchair by the year 2000. I'm still standing on 2 feet. So I would resist this, being quite honest.
Thank you. So there are no more requests to speak. Philip, you do have the right to speak again if there's anything new that you would wish to add.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Right, 175. Just to clarify again, and thank you to the chair, that I am simply quoting from the bill in the first part, and I am seeking in these factual deliverances to say things that are not apparent from the report, but about topics on which the report speaks. And what I am seeking to do here then is to have balance, rather than seeking to impose one view on assembly. I'm seeking to have a balance that I believe is not apparent from reading the report itself. And these are three, I believe, factual things that I'm saying here.
Thank you. Michael, is there another request to speak? No. Convener, the last word.
Moderator, the working group would oppose this new motion. I can understand that the proposer of the motion wishes to put forward what he says are factual statements, but I think one of the challenges involved in that is that while some of the facts may be true, there is a lack of background and context if the General Assembly were to, particularly for 1 and 2, back statements in isolation. For example, while many people do argue that the definition in terms of terminal illness, etc., is too broad, I did check with the sponsor of the bill, Liam MacArthur, and I asked him what his understanding was of this particular section of the legislation, and he's told me that the bill will give choice at the end of life to adults who are actively dying. They would have to have expressed a clear, settled and informed wish and to have the mental capacity to make their decision. They must have a terminal illness which they will not recover from, which is worsening and at a late stage, and is expected to cause their premature death, as assessed by at least 2 independent doctors. As such, people with long-term conditions that are not terminally ill wouldn't be considered eligible. Now, the point is that is his interpretation of what's in the legislation, and others make a different interpretation. But I think it would be dangerous for the Assembly to agree to this particular section because of the reasons I've given. In terms of the second one, Moderator, one of the main concerns, of course, about assisted dying legislation is the worry about the expansion of eligibility criteria, one of the so-called slippery slope arguments. And people do point to other countries, such as the Netherlands and Switzerland, where the definition of untreatable illness has been expanded in some mental health conditions. And for many, there is an inevitability that a widening of the criteria follows the introduction of legislation. Our report cites the Westminster Select Committee report on assisted dying, which took a neutral position, and in fact says that no jurisdiction that initially restricted assisted dying legislation to those with a terminal illness has subsequently expanded the criteria to non-terminal conditions. Now, it's important to say that doesn't mean that it could not happen, but this is the reason some find that particular slippery slope argument not entirely convincing. In terms of the situation in Canada, just to give some background, the context here is very different from the Scottish situation. In Canada, assisted dying was determined by a court case rather than by a parliamentarian introducing legislation. In 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that a ban on assisted dying for those with grievous and irredeemable conditions was unconstitutional, and it gave Parliament 12 months to repeal the law that criminalised those who assisted another's death. The court also gave Parliament the option to bring forward alternative legislation. So in 2016, lawmakers rushed through a law that was narrower than the court's ruling, which was immediately challenged, and they were subsequently forced to comply with the original Supreme Court ruling, and the legislation was amended in 2020. So given this unique way in which assisted dying was introduced in Canada, I think it's very difficult to make any comparison with Scotland or any other jurisdictions. And so that is why I would encourage the Assembly not to approve this particular section, because we don't have all that background, that complicated background, in the section that's being put forward. And finally, I would agree with Mr. Kerr that I think it would be wrong of the Assembly to highlight only one particular disability group. And I think if that was going to be a valid new section, it would have to give a range of different views from disability groups. And so again, I would urge the Assembly not to support that section.
Thank you, Convener. So we're going to move to 3 electronic votes, taking each section of this proposed new deliverance at a time. So Sheila, I'll pass to you, but we're at the proposed new section 3A.
Right, so we're voting for or against new section 3A. The voting buttons on the hub, excuse me, will appear on the current live debate page. In the hall, it's button 1 for, button 2 against. The voting is now open. Five seconds. The vote is now closed.
So they voted for the amendment 105, against the amendment 189. So section 3A falls. We move now to section 3B. Again, Sheila will direct us.
Once she's sorted out her throat, moderator. So, for or against part 2 of that whole new section. I'm assuming that in the hall it's button 1 for or button 2 against. The vote is now open. Five seconds. The vote is now closed.
So they voted for 88, against 214. So section 3B falls. Our final electronic vote is for section 3C. And I'm guessing it's the same as last time.
It's the same as last time. So if you're ready, the vote is now open. Five seconds. The vote is now closed.
They voted 78 for, 228 against, so section 3C also falls. The Principal Clerk has suggested that we take a 10-minute break. It's intense, this, and we've been at it for quite a long time. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, go stretch your legs, and we will return and we will finish this before we end our business for the day. So back here just before 10.
Okay, so we are moving to section 3 in the print, but we've got an amendment. So we go to the amendment first, and then Scott McMinnis, I'll read that out.
Okay, General Assembly, we are moving to section 3.
A very quick question, if I may.
Always in order.
Thank you. Jonathan Clipson, Commissioner 332. Just a quick question. It was good to hear John clarify that in supporting these overtures, it would not be seen as a support for legislation in response to a comment made earlier by a Commissioner. I just think an assurance that in any kind of press release that this would be carefully articulated so that we all know how the press can be with these things, and it's also could be taken as an implicit assent on people who haven't been here and heard these debates.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. The moderators allow me to answer. We haven't made our final decisions yet. So there is absolutely, once we've got the final decisions, I can assure you that on all the motions we've got at the moment, there will be a nuance. But it is clear that we're not supporting the legislation. So I can't sort of go to you absolutely, but there's nothing in this that says we support the legislation.
Thank you very much. If the overtures are passed, in terms of the publicity, was the assurance I was asking about?
Nothing in any of the proposed counter motions or the deliverance that says the Church of Scotland supports the assisted dying legislation. Therefore, there will be literally no press saying we support that legislation, and you have my personal guarantee.
Yeah.
You heard it here. Okay, so
I'm not going to support it.
Moving to section 3 is in the print. We have an amendment in the name of Scott McMinnis. The clerk will read the text.
So this is an amendment to the section 3 as in the print. So at the beginning, add the following words: acknowledging that the introduction of assisted dying legislation has the potential to negatively impact the quality and accessibility of palliative and end-of-life care.
Is this seconded? Is the convener willing to accept it?
Moderator, I think we'd be happy to let the Assembly decide on this one. There are those who have undertaken research which puts forward the opposite view, but I think in this case, particularly given the fact that the word potential is in the new section, I think we'd be happy just to let the Assembly make its own decision on this one.
Okay, Scott, I'll ask you to speak to it, please.
Thank you, Moderator. I wanted to take a moment as well just to thank the convener and the working group for the time and effort they've put into this report. And I support the call in Section 3 of the Deliverance for the Scottish Government to prioritise excellent palliative care. And I bring this amendment to strengthen that call by naming the risk posed by assisted dying legislation. The report discusses this risk briefly, but suggests that fears about negative impacts have not been realised. And I believe that this conclusion is, at best, contested. There's research by Professor David Jones of the Anscombe Bioethics Centre that shows over a 7-year period, palliative care provision rose by just 7.9% in Western European countries with assisted dying, compared with a 25% increase in countries without it. In the United States, states with assisted dying laws saw only a 3.2% increase in hospital palliative care teams, compared with 9.4% in states without such laws. In both Canada and Australia, funding promises for palliative care that were made alongside the introduction of assisted dying legislation were later scaled back or reallocated. In Canada, it was $6 billion that was promised over 10 years, and after 6 years, less than 2.5% of that money had actually been spent on palliative care. These are not abstract fears, they're emerging patterns where assisted dying legislation is introduced. And these concerns are echoed by professional voices. The Association of Palliative Medicine has raised serious warnings. A survey found that 98% of Scottish palliative care doctors believed assisted dying should have no place in mainstream healthcare. The Nuffield Trust has stated that such legislation is likely to impact health services, including palliative care, and the Royal College of Physicians has cautioned that the introduction of assisted dying could lower clinical standards and protections. There are also quieter, but no less troubling concerns about morale in hospices and care homes, about the trust that underpins the doctor-patient relationship, concerns that the First Minister raised just last week. The report rightly notes that the existing injustices in palliative care access, particularly in rural areas and among poorer or minority groups. But as Christians, these are exactly the people we are called to defend. Our belief in the sanctity of life is rooted in the conviction that every person, as we just affirmed, is made in the image of God, and that suffering should never be met with abandonment, but with love, care, and presence. In a culture that is shaped by cost, convenience, and autonomy, we have a prophetic task to insist that compassion means more than offering escape. It means standing with people in their pain. This amendment simply asks us to tell the truth and to acknowledge these risks, risks that, in my view, are unacceptable. Either way, if we are serious about justice and care at the end of life, then we must name these risks as we call on the Scottish Government to act. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. The convener has indicated that he would like the Assembly to vote on this. So, convener, are you happy we move to the vote? Sheila?
Certainly, Moderator. Here we go. Same as usual, button 1 for, button 2 against. And the vote is open. Five seconds. The vote is now closed.
So they're voted for the amendment, 215. They're voted against the amendment, 72. So the amendment carries. We turn to voting for section 3 as amended. Sorry?
Now with section 3 as amended, and we've got somebody speaking.
Somebody wants to speak. Yvonne Grant.
She's over there.
Who is...
She's over there. Is somebody helping Yvonne to... Brilliant,
Okay.
Yvonne. Is somebody...
Yes.
please, sweetheart, if you can get yourself... Can somebody make sure she assist her, please? Thank you. Thank you. Go for it, Yvonne. Does somebody move the microphone down for Yvonne, please? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Moderator 311, Yvonne Grant. Friends and colleagues, I was approached at the service at St Giles yesterday to possibly making a comment on the bill that has been discussed in both Houses of Parliament and presbyteries throughout the land and is now being discussed here before us today. I am replying to this request. Here are my few personal thoughts. I looked after my parents for over 42 years, both of them whom had a great faith and believed in life after, in the love of God and our Saviour. Both my mother and I had the medical condition, osteogenesis imperfecta, a lifelong condition that requires medical help during our lifetimes, sometimes spending many weeks in hospital or with medical help coming into our home. There are ministers here who have been a great help to me and my family through the most difficult of times. The first one was a young minister in his first charge, entering through my then church door and shaking my hand and that of my parents. My mother then took gravely ill and was in hospital for many weeks. And during that time, she lost her sight and most of her hearing. This young minister visited on a regular basis, and all the while she was discharged back into her home. He visited weekly and would sit on her bed, have a drink, and always end with a prayer. That the young minister concerned was only a person who was allowed to call her Maggie, as her name was Margaret. Eventually, her illness took her life at the end of 2020, and she was on palliative care, living at home with district nursing staff and others helping her last days. So very peaceful, and the passing she wanted. We moved forward to COVID pandemic. I too landed in hospital with numerous fractures in the acute trauma ward, resulting in a 5-week stay. During that time, my father also had a chest infection, and he was in the next ward on oxygen. And so there I was, being pushed in a hospital bed into a side room to go and visit, and my mum was in respite. Thankfully, we all returned home, back to our own wee home, with lots of care coming in. My father, David, passed this time last year, with a few days before the GA24. His last years were in a care home, where his palliative care needs were taken care of with the greatest care and dignity. Moderator, when I was asked to be POA for my late parents in my early 20s, I made sure that they talked to our GPs, and a meeting was agreed where she would come to our house and complete any relevant paperwork required both in law and in medical accuracy. Thankfully, both had DNRs and in their files the instructions that were made many years previously, and when the time came, both were given the medical help they needed to remove all pain in their final hours of life. I was also given the question, would you like to withdraw pain relief now, or when would you like the time to do it? Or let's talk about it. I must also thank another minister who is also here today, who conducted my dad's funeral at his church and who came and visited with the utmost care too. Moderator, I honestly believe that without God, who is our strength and our Redeemer, I would not be here without my personal beliefs in him. And I wish everyone, including myself, the death that I and they have planned. So go and talk with all medical teams, concerns, care workers, family and others whom you trust with such a delicate problem at the end when the bell rings that it will be the passing that you desire and that going forward that is done with due care and professional care. I wish you all of God's blessings both now and in the future when such difficult decisions have to be made. And let's face it, your loved ones truly know what they want for their end-of-life treatment. And we should have that choice whether we go abroad or stay in our own confines of which we are comfortable, because these decisions have been made well in advance with whom we love and those medical teams who care. As for my own personal choice, I wish to stay at home with the memories and those I hold close to my heart and my own personal faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. So we move to section 3 as amended. Approved in the hall and approved online. Turning to section 4, we have both an amendment and a counter motion, 2 counter motions. So we're going to deal with the amendment first of all in the name of Scott Burton. Fiona will read it to us.
Oh, Scott Burton. Here we are. Thank you, Moderator. In the name of Scott Burton, amend section 4 by deleting note and substituting at the start, agree to change the position of the church by affirming.
Scott Burton, number 206.
You're willing.
This builds on my earlier question that if we were to vote as the Deliverance as it currently is written, this would be changing our position within the church. And it would seem clearer to change the language so as we understand that and we know clearly then what we are voting for or against when it comes time to vote for the said Deliverance.
Can I just say the convener is willing to accept this?
Perfect. I'm just making it clear for the Assembly then why this change would be potentially helpful. I don't have anything more to say. I was just about to finish. Thank you, Moderator.
Okay, so the convener is willing to accept this. I see no other notices, request to speak. Is the General Assembly willing to accept this? Accepted in the hall and accepted online. So we have section 4 as amended. We now also have 2 counter motions. And I'm maybe going to ask the clerk how we deal with the 2 of them.
Thank you very much, Moderator. What we all need. Right, we have 2 counter motions in. We're going to, what happens when you've got 2? We've got the motion as amended, that's all there, and we're going to have 2 more options. And then we will vote for, you vote for 1, 2 or 3. Okay, so it's a vote for 1, 2 or 3. But you need to hear about 2 and 3. Yeah, you with me still? Thank you. Keep. Will I make all right? So the first one we're going to look at is the Alistair Cook, and we'll ask Mr. Cook to speak. And this is the first of the counter motions, and it is acknowledging the diversity of sincerely held theological views within our broad church, reaffirm the Church of Scotland's opposition to assisted dying.
Alistair, I should say, is this seconded?
Yes.
Alistair.
Thank you, Moderator. My thanks to the convener and the working group for all their detailed work on this. I move this counter motion because as I looked at the Deliverance, there would otherwise be no opportunity to affirm opposition to assisted dying in the Deliverance. The existing Section 5 jumps to a situation where assisted dying has been legalised and it says there needs to be safeguards in place. But a step has been missed out there for me, and I'm sure for others of us, and that is to give the General Assembly the opportunity to affirm our position at the moment of opposition to the principle of assisted dying itself. And this counter-motion does that. I step with trepidation into this deep and emotive issue, but step I must. First of all, we need to avoid confusion with the situation where someone is dying and, for example, as part of their palliative care, they are given pain-controlling treatment which has the secondary effect of hastening their death. Or there is a do not resuscitate instruction in place, or perhaps other interventions are withdrawn. We also know from experience, pastoral experience, personal experience, that there are times when we pray to the Lord to take someone quickly. But we praise God, we know that when any of us goes through that darkest of valleys, we can trust God who is with us even there. The Lord is my shepherd, goes with us through that darkest valley. Jesus went through that darkest valley for us and brings us through faith in him to be with him forever. For this I have Jesus. But assisted dying is something else. I attended a time of prayer on YouTube recently to pray about this assisted dying situation in the parliaments, so on. Someone in a post in the YouTube chat used the word suicide, just in context of what they were saying. YouTube instantly shut the session down. Couldn't continue on that platform. Why? Because any discussion of suicide is considered potentially harmful. And I have to say the irony of this did not escape me when we were there praying about this very issue. For assisted dying is assisted suicide. The change in language in the current debates is purpose. Assisted dying does not provoke as much negative response in people as assisted suicide does. Moderator, the wisest advice I ever heard on this matter was from a retired Christian lawyer, of which there are some, of course. It was this: you cannot allow the principle. Once the principle is conceded, as effectively this Deliverance does by affirming all positions, the door is open and cannot easily be shut, and the safeguards cannot bear the weight put upon them. Moderator, we cannot allow the principle. I urge commissioners to support this counter-motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. The second counter-motion is in the name of Moira. Do we want to do... On... Oh, right. Sorry. Okay. Little bit of disconnect, misunderstanding of how we're doing this. So we've listened to Alistair. There are a whole load of voices wishing to speak for and against this. So, oh, sorry.
Sorry, folks. I'm seeing a lot of names, which is really important. But given that maybe we just do hear, what does the Assembly think? Because I'm concerned, we're almost getting a bit dictated to by this. And I'm concerned that we then have a debate just on the two, when actually we're going to be voting for the three. What do you think? Are we allowed to put out the third one so that we see the different bits?
Excellent, because that's what the moderator thinks is a really good idea.
And thank you, moderator.
Excellent.
Anyone, hang on, is there anyone? Yes, Gordon, tell us we're wrong.
No, moderator, sorry, Gordon Kennedy, number 13. I would never tell the principal clerk she's wrong. I have a question. If we're going to put the motion and the 2 counter motions out, can you tell us just now, when we get to voting, how are we going to vote?
I said that earlier.
I think you can't say it often enough, just to make sure that we all remember how and when we're going to vote and what we're going to vote for and what goes with where.
Helpful as ever, Gordon. We are just getting a slide up when we get to that point of voting that will have all 3 motions on the slide. And when we get to the vote, the first vote will be you vote for either 1, 2 or 3. So you choose which is the motion you like the best. Okay, there we are. So that's the motions. Can you read it very much? But anyway. And when we get there, then if there's an overall majority for one, that's it decided. If there is not an overall majority for one, the lowest number then falls away. We then go back to vote with what's left. So it could be 2 and 3. It could be 1 and 3. And then whichever one has the highest vote then becomes the agreed motion of the General Assembly. And then, as my lovely Christine has just reminded me, we get another vote. And then when we get to that point, we then double, triple check that that is the view of the Assembly. And thankfully, the convener of legal questions is nodding her head in the direction affirming me. Thank you. Is that helpful?
It is, and thank you. So, we move to the second counter motion in the name of Moira Taylor-Winterskill.
I'll read it out, Moira, sweetheart. Right, Moira's motion, so this is the third one, acknowledging the diversity of sincerely held theological views within our broad church, affirm the Church of Scotland's position as being nuanced opposition to assisted dying.
Moira. Number 345. I was a commissioner to the General Assembly in 2023, and I stood up to speak at the time and shared with you the story of my own lung cancer and my 18-year-old daughter's death. And I came to that assembly with a visceral opposition to assisted dying. So I was quite surprised to find myself standing up and asking for this work to be done. Because I think the phrase I used was, we need to show our working out. It's not enough to just say we're opposed. Because people can then just write it off, well, of course you would be opposed, of course you would be. So it's quite a small change that I'm suggesting, but I would hope that the word nuanced would lead people to actually go to the debate, go to the discussion, and actually read and understand all the different viewpoints. So that's why I've put in this counter motion.
Thank you, Moira. So we're going to move to discussion, which means I'll need the names back on. We have a lot of names, so if what you were going to say has been said, please do withdraw your name, because there could be a lot of repetition. Once we've had discussion, I will allow the 2 proposers to have a final word, and then we'll move to the convener to close the debate. So if we take firstly Ben Thorpe, and then Justin Taylor, Janet McKellar, Susan Pym. Ben Thorpe.
Ben Thorpe, 174. Thank you, moderator. When Tara Granados first brought this to the 2023 General Assembly, asking us to consider a breadth of views, I felt moved to speak at that point, although I was not a commissioner, and sadly the TV does not work in that way. In particular, her story resonated with my own. She spoke of watching the decline of her father due to Parkinson's, and my father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2015, and I too watched his physical and mental decline over time. My father was a Church of England vicar for 50 years, serving in urban and rural parishes, and served well into retirement before Parkinson's made it impossible.
Like ministers of all denominations, he had spent many hours with those nearing death and presided at countless funerals, and like me, he was, until he died on March 14th this year, firmly against legislation of assisted dying in any form. And I tell that story to illustrate what I believe is a vital point in the discussion. These are deeply personal stories, but they are on both sides, or in fact across the spectrum, and they cannot be the deciding factor here. We are a church. The deciding factor ultimately should be spiritual, and there is an expectation upon the church to provide spiritual wisdom and guidance within our society. I do concur that with the report that a diversity of views is a strength, but I don't think that a diversity of views means a lack of confirmed position for the church. Indeed, I don't think it's necessarily a binary. It's merely drawing a circle around a part of that spectrum of views, and we do this in many areas. There's potentially a diversity of views on nuclear disarmament, but a stated position that we will be asked to reaffirm on Wednesday. There's definitely a diversity of views on Israel-Palestine, but earlier today we voted on stated views advocating a state of Palestine. And with matters such as these, to say nothing actually says an awful lot about the church, about God, and about matters of life and death. And like Eileen, I find that a strange omission from the report is anything about life after death. Are we not a church of our risen Lord? I'm sure that all of us, ministers, deacons, elders, have all experienced funerals, both of those who have died faithful followers of Jesus and those who have died with little connection to church and faith, and are aware of the differences between them. And so I draw on the words of the Heidelberg Catechism, which was one of the original options for inclusion in our Book of Confessions and is in the PCUSA Book of Confessions. My one comfort in life and death is that I am not my own, but belong, body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Saviour, Jesus Christ. Our lives are not a problem waiting to be solved. Our lives don't find their worth in our functionality, but they are precious to Jesus in this life and the next. And so I agree to second this amendment, or this counter motion. It sits in line with what was originally asked for in 2023, when Tara said she was not seeking to reverse this position, nor seeking to move to a stance of neutrality, but rather that the Assembly acknowledge a diversity of views. I suggest we do what she asks, acknowledge those views, but also reaffirm our opposition to assisted dying.
Thank you, Ben. Justin?
Thank you, Moderator. Justin Taylor, 417. I first have to start with a caveat. I'm a chaplain as part of my role in Guernsey at a hospital, and I sit on an MDT, multidisciplinary team that works with palliative care and has had this discussion. The debate you're having now is not gone through the states of Guernsey, so our conversation has repercussions in other jurisdictions later. I also wanted to say that language often defeats us. And one of the things I dislike about this General Assembly is that we become quite tribal. We're all Bible-believing. We all believe in the sanctity of life. We all want the best, you know. And just because we hold different views doesn't mean that we're anti each other. And so I just really want us to be careful on the language we use when describing each other in this forum. As my role as the minister and chaplain, because of this church's historical position on a number of issues, I'm not always at the table when it comes to the hardest decisions people make. Those gut-wrenching decisions that, you know when you're in them, that pull you to the floor and just leave you weeping. Those life-changing decisions that just break your heart and break the heart of people around you. I've yet to come into contact with a person who wants to speak to me about some path that they've been on to make a decision that few will understand about their body. And many years later, 20 years later, they come to me and they would say, I have shame and guilt. I'm picking up the pieces because they didn't have the appropriate support and love when they had to go through these decisions. By keeping the traditional view, and I actually am against all three of the proposals for different reasons, but by keeping to the traditional view, what we're doing is my fear of what we're doing is we're locking ourselves outside the room. That because we are saying that no, or or whatever we're going for, what people will assume that when it's time to make those gut-wrenching decisions, the decisions that'll change a life, we're outside because we've made a decision to exclude ourselves. People are scared to approach their minister because they're fearful they will be judged. Those gut-wrenching decisions alone. Nobody wants to make the decision. There's not one person I know, both sides, who wants to actually make the decision. And also, what about the staff? Who's going to look after them? Who's going to care for the doctors, the nurses, if we make this decision? So for different reasons, I want to go with the original. But I also want to respect the nuance in the church of different views, because I think it's important that we are united in our diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to Janet McKellar, then Susan Pym.
Thank you, Moderator. Janet McKellar, 373, Clare LME. I'd like to support Alistair's motion on a personal basis and also in a theological stance. I'd like to just tell you a story. It's all about stories. We all have one. In 2012, my husband Gordon was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. It was described as a bulky tumour, and he was told that it was incurable and inoperable. And he probably had around 4 months to live. He was offered chemotherapy as a potential avenue to extend his life, but the prognosis was not good. He undertook the chemotherapy, and after just 2 doses, the tumour was reduced by 50%. And at the end of 6 doses, there was no sign of cancer whatsoever. The oncologist said to us, "This happens sometimes, and we don't know why." I told him why. Because we had put our faith in God, and he had come through for us. Gordon lived for a further 12 years, happy and healthy years, and we welcomed another 6 grandchildren into our family. Last year, Gordon died of a completely unrelated health issue. His esophageal cancer never returned. During Gordon's most recent illness, he had many hospital admissions. And I watched as Gordon and others were constantly asked about resuscitation. Gordon wanted to be resuscitated, but they kept asking the question, and on some occasions I heard people just being told that that was not an option for them. They were not even given the choice. Ultimately, in our home on the 24th of March 2024, I did see paramedics try to resuscitate Gordon. And I take comfort in the fact that I know they did absolutely everything they could to keep him with us. But God had other plans. Finally, and most importantly, God gives life and God takes it away. We are the people of God, and we need to stand with our brothers and sisters, and particularly the stance that the Roman Catholic Church have taken. Stand up and be counted, because people are looking to us as the church. So please, I commend Alistair's amendment or motion to this General Assembly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We move to Susan Pym and then Graham Murray and Brian Kerr. Susan Pym is online.
Thank you, Moderator. Susan Pym, number 421.
I'd like to say that I don't think it's one thing or the other. It's not about being in favour of something or opposing something. My plea is quite simply for choice, to give people the choice. Believe me, life is hard enough if you're facing a difficult, perhaps very painful death, without feeling that your church has abandoned you and does not support you. I spoke this time last year. It was a privilege to be allowed to speak at the assembly. And I told the commissioners about my sister who died 3 years ago at the age of 56. She had a terrible, really terrible neurological disease. First of all, it was diagnosed as Parkinson's, but latterly we were told it was something called multiple system atrophy. It's as bad as it gets. It's worth Googling just to see what she suffered. She asked me on 3 separate occasions to help her to end her life, which was intolerable, but I couldn't do it. Even in her final hours, her final day, because she wasn't unconscious, she was being cared for in a wonderful hospice, she still asked me to help her, and I couldn't do it because it was against the law. Please don't make me or other people feel guilty, because I supported her wishes and I would have helped her if I could and if it had been lawful. You see, having the choice to end her life, I believe, would have led my sister to actually having a more peaceful death, knowing that she could have some control, some say. I don't believe that only our secular community support assisted dying, nor that only people who do not believe in an afterlife are the supporters. I am a devout Christian. I fully support assisted dying. I have to add, I also don't understand the point that's been made that there is value in suffering, because I cannot believe in a God that wanted my sister to suffer so greatly. Please do not oppose assisted dying. Instead, please allow dying people their own personal choice. Give them that freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm losing track of who I said was next. I think I had it was somebody and then Brian. Graham Murray and then Brian Kerr. Up in the balcony. Right.
Graham Murray, 194. I found myself, as a Christian lawyer, agreeing with the person that Alistair quoted in his introduction and was keen to speak in support of the motion. While, like many others, recognising the serious dilemmas, my own view is that legalising assisted dying creates more and more serious problems than it is attempting to solve. Some of these have been discussed already, so I'll be brief, but fundamentally altering the doctor-patient relationship, the risk to disabled and other vulnerable groups in society, potential undermining of suicide prevention strategies by normalising death as an escape from suffering, and also just creating a real risk of future expansion. I disagree that the experience in Canada is irrelevant. However, the legislation is arrived at. It is perfectly open to change through further legislation or to legal challenge, and that can certainly not be excluded. The report presented alternative theological views. I personally was not persuaded that there was the weight of theological argument to support such a fundamental change on the Church's position in this serious matter. And I would argue that we're not considering the principle in a vacuum. There is a bill presently in process through the Parliament. Again, as a lawyer, I see many and various problems with that, including the definition of a terminal illness, as previously highlighted. I do not think that it is really credible to approve the principle without it being, the context of it is that there is a bill before Parliament, so many are likely to see that as broad support for that. And there are so many problems that I feel that we continuing to oppose is the right way to go. Just to conclude, I do feel that we have more to offer by bringing God's comfort and love to those suffering from terminal illnesses than helping them to end their lives. And I also would add, I don't think that taking a position excludes the opportunity to care pastorally for those who may have different views. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Peter Johnston. Oh. Well, let's take Brian, because I said Brian first of all. If it's a comment, we'll just add you to the list. Brian Kerr.
Moderator, thank you. Kerr 212. I hear what folks have said about everyone having a story. I'm here to say I don't. But I'm listening. And I'm listening to this discussion and the debate and the people who are sharing these stories. And I find myself, as I expected to be, really quite moved by it. But because of that, I'm also aware of that middle space that this report offers us and holds. And I just want to, there was one comment, I think it was Ben made it earlier, about saying nothing in a report. This is not a report that says nothing. It's a report that says everything. And it says that as a church, we have people who can hold views with integrity on all parts of this debate. And it allows us, as my friend Justin here said, to with integrity, speak and journey alongside people who want that counsel, people who want to hear what the church has offered, people like John who asked us earlier to text them and to pray with them and to offer that space just to listen. We've heard stories of miracles and hope against medical odds, and we've also heard stories of horrendous pain and suffering. This whole debate is a spectrum, and there is never going to be one answer. We are not being asked to support a bill going through any parliament at the moment. We are being asked to recognise the complexity of the discussion, the debate, and the integrity that people hold their beliefs with. We are created people, created beings, who have the opportunity to think and to consider, to prayerfully reflect, and yes, believe in hope and resurrection and life beyond this. But we're being asked simply to note this spectrum of views. I would have voted for the original motion in the committee's name. I find myself slightly conflicted about the amended motion. However, I understand that we are moving a position. But I think that's all we're doing. So I would urge the Assembly to go with what the committee say and vote with their motion. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. So we take Peter Johnston and then Scott Burton, and then I'm going to propose that we move back to the movers of the two counter motions before hearing the convener end the debate.
Moderator, Peter Johnston, 337. Yes, Moderator, I wasn't planning to speak this afternoon, and I know all of us that are here have been listening hard to the different stories that we've been hearing, and I'm sure for some of us it's been bringing back difficult memories. For me, it was bringing back memories of my father's death when I was a teenager, and he had been ill for as long as I could remember. And at the end, we were just waiting. He was in a coma for the time to come. And 37 years later, I can still hear my mother's voice calling from downstairs saying, "It's over." And in hearing all of our stories, different stories today, we hear that we have a diversity of opinion. And that's okay. It's good to hold that diversity of opinion. And what we've been asked or presented from the committee is a generous gift to hold that diversity of opinion while recognizing all of our own individual experiences and the stories that we can tell. And so I would like to support what is in the name of the committee as amended and encourage others to do so. Thank you, Moderator.
Okay, thank you. So Scott Burton, and then we'll return to Alistair Cook.
Justin Taylor, 417. It's no offence to Reverend Burton, but he's motioned. So can he speak within the general parameters of the debate?
He's not motioned.
Is he not motioned the first part about agreeing?
We've approved that.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood, sorry.
Don't worry, I love my brother Justin dearly. We trained together. Scott Burton, number 206. We've heard many difficult and authentic stories, and I want to thank everyone for sharing them and being vulnerable in such a large gathering, one that's also streamed. So you have our greatest love. I would want to challenge one or two little comments along the way in the discussion that I do not think to vote in favour of one of the counter motions. I like both in different ways. I do not think it means we are abandoning people to hold to a current position against assisted dying. I don't think we're excluding ourselves from a room. That is just someone's choice. If I was a chaplain, as much as a parish minister, if someone of any faith wanted me in a room, I would be there, and I wouldn't be ramming Jesus down their throat. I would be there with my Muslim brother and sister, my Sikh brother and sister, my fellow human being, because we are humans. I don't need to change who I am or what I believe, nor do I think we need to do that as a denomination to be of presence with others. We haven't talked very much in the debate about coercion, or not for some time. And I'd want to just flag that up again, because many of our laws are there for the safeguard of the most vulnerable. I was speaking with a human rights lawyer about what was coming to our parliaments and today, and he could trip off the tongue 3 examples of elderly members of families who he is trying to prove were coerced to change their will so that someone could get their money and such like. And judges he knows could tell stories of thinking that's happened in other cases, but they could just never prove it because proving it's really hard. And we are going to increase the risk of that even more for the most vulnerable. We might not do it. Our families might not do it. But it will happen. That is the conclusion of so many lawyers. We limit choice all the time. I think I can drive faster than 30 miles an hour safely most of the time. But we choose to put limits there for the safeguard of our children and one another. We choose to limit not having guns in this country because We don't want to end up like other countries and just see lives taken again and again, and often, again, the most vulnerable. So I would urge us to support one of the two counter motions, that we might safeguard the most vulnerable and steer clear of increasing the risk of coercion. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Alistair, is there anything new that you would wish to add in closing?
Thank you, Moderator. My seconder, Dr. Peter Murdoch, was going to speak, but he wasn't called to speak in the list there, but he just wanted to say that he was a retired geriatrician, so he has experience in this field very much. Speaks about people feeling a burden and making a particular decision in relation to assisted dying on that basis. I don't want to say too much, just simply to reiterate that the motion from the working group opens the door to assisted dying, and I would want just to repeat what I said earlier: you cannot allow the principle. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Alistair. And Moira, anything additional you'd like to say?
Campaigners in favour of assisted dying have welcomed moves by Scotland's largest church to take a neutral stance on a new bill to legalise the practice. That was the headline in The Guardian on the 7th of May. We can't operate as if we're in some kind of vacuum. And I think we might separate ourselves from the bill that's currently going through, but clearly the media are not separating what we're saying here from the bill. But I think to just say that we affirm opposition just almost negates the whole process that we've just been through, which is why it's a small thing, but why I feel that the word nuanced is important. I have to say that my visceral opposition to assisted dying comes from a deeply spiritual place, in that I've never felt the weight of God so intensely as I did in the intensive care room when my daughter was dying. So, but at the same time, I have heard in 2023 and today the intensity of feeling on the other side. And so in some ways, I think we need to have a clearer response, but I think to just say we're opposed again at the end of the day is just not doing justice to the whole level of discussion and investigation and listening that's gone on.
Thank you, Moira. Convener, to close the debate.
Thank you, Moderator. If I could deal with the counter-motion in regard to nuanced opposition first. I think in itself this would lead to great uncertainty in terms of what we are actually saying here. How do you define nuanced? I looked up a dictionary definition which says it's a subtle difference or distinction in expression, meaning, response, etc. How do we explain in what ways we are opposed and in what areas we might partially be in agreement with? I think it would be extremely difficult to explain this to the church, and indeed even more challenging to explain it to the press. And so, Moderator, I would urge the Assembly not to support this counter-motion. I think it would lead to considerable confusion and uncertainty as we tried our best to define what we actually mean by nuanced opposition. But, Moderator, we now have an opportunity, which I think is very much to be welcomed, for the Assembly on behalf of the Church of Scotland to make a choice. Should the Church maintain the opposition to assisted dying, which it has held on to for decades, or should it adopt a new position of recognising the theological validity of all views on this matter and affirming all of these views? I do appreciate that there will be some who are concerned about the fact that if we do adopt this position that we are putting forward, that some may argue that the Church is then not speaking with a clear voice. there's a risk that the church might be seen to be sitting on the fence. But if you look closely at what we are seeing here, if you read carefully our report, we are not engaging in fence sitting, and we are not indeed taking a neutral stance. Indeed, as was just said, when our report was first released, The Guardian did indeed take the view that we were taking a neutral position. They didn't actually make the effort to check with myself or the press office first what we were actually saying. We are not taking a neutral position, and if the press put that forward, then the press have got it wrong. Another point that people might make is that how do we still engage in advocacy if we take the position that we are putting forward today? And yet, in many ways, what this does mean is that church members can, of course, still continue to engage in advocacy themselves. And in fact, in some respects, a church member writing to their MSP can maybe carry more weight than a General Assembly Deliverance. And I therefore would put forward the view that advocacy will still and must still continue, whatever your view may be on assisted dying. Moderator, over the last 2 years, our conversations with all the presbyteries and other stakeholders has confirmed what has been said at recent assemblies. There are a variety of deeply held, sincere views on this issue. There are many people who have not made up their minds. We hope that our report will be a resource which people both inside and outside the church will be able to engage in. We hope it might help people to come to an informed decision. But I would say today to the Assembly that if Mr. Cook's motion were to be accepted, it would take one side on a very emotive issue where there is no agreement across the church. And in many ways, that might risk overshadowing the important areas on which there is significant agreement. The Church of Scotland can continue to make an important contribution to this issue and continue to contribute to the issue of the bill going through Parliament. Mr. Cook's new section asked that the Church affirm its previous position of blanket opposition to assisted dying. We would question what it means for the Church to affirm a position not held by the people in it, and for what is the Church if it is not its people. Moderator, I would urge the Assembly to resist the counter motions.
Thank you, Convener. So, just so we know what is happening, I'm going to ask the clerk to read out the motion and the two counter motions and take time to listen carefully, to think clearly, to pray as you're doing this, so you know yourself how you are going to vote. Okay. So we have three options in front of us.
Okay, right. So the motion, which is the motion as in the committee's report, is as follows. Agree to change the position of the church by affirming the diversity of theological views in the church on the issue of assisted dying and the integrity with which they are held. So to vote for that, you would do 1. The second counter motion, is in the name of Mr. Cook, and this is acknowledging the diversity of sincerely held theological views within our broad church, reaffirm the Church of Scotland's opposition to assisted dying. And the second counter motion in the name of Moira Taylor-Winterskill is acknowledging the diversity of sincerely held theological views within our broad church. Affirm the church... Oh, blimey.
I think that's called mutiny in the ranks.
She didn't touch it, so I hope that wasn't the Holy Spirit. But anyway... Apology, I'll start from the beginning more. Anyway, we all know the first bit. So Moira's one is affirm the Church of Scotland's position as being nuanced opposition to assisted dying. 1, 2, 3, yeah? And you vote for 1, 2, or 3, depending what you think.
Moderator, point of order is Clement.
Oh.
Keown is online.
A point of order?
He's online.
I'm not seeing a name.
Mark McCone.
Mark McCone?
Not the amended it. The amended, but the text on the hub hasn't changed. So it's just so that we have clarity on seeing what we're voting on all three on the hub, please.
Have you refreshed?
Yeah, if you refresh your page, I'm assured that it will now work. So we're voting, Sheila, I'll let you explain.
Yeah. That's okay. Just for a bit of clarification for me, on the buttons on the hub, do they say 1, 2, 3, or do they say motion, counter motion, counter motion? Right, you just select the one that you want. Okay, in the hall, button 1 is the motion, button 2 is counter motion 1, button 3 is counter motion 2. So the voting is now open. Five seconds. The voting is now closed.
So there we go, we'll need to vote again. Yeah. So they voted for the motion, 135. For the counter motion in the name of Alistair Cook, 129. For the counter motion in the name of Moira Taylor-Wintersgill, 22. So Moira's counter motion falls. It means we have to vote again, so we're voting between the motion in the name of the committee and the counter motion in the name of Alistair Cook.
Moderator, it will just take us a moment to get that sorted on the hub, so 30 seconds or so, and we'll be able to move to that.
That's excellent. Just while they're doing that, I know a number of you have been invited to the moderator's reception, which was due to start at 6:30. The moderator is still here. There will be folk along in St Cuthbert's. They'll have drunk all the wine, I think, by the time we get there. But we're staying here until this is completed. This is more important than a moderator's reception. So we're ready to go. Sheila?
Okay. So you've got now two options, the motion and the counter motion in the name of Alistair Cook. Button 1 in the hall is the motion, button 2 in the hall is the counter motion. So the vote is now open. 5 seconds. The vote is now closed.
So they're voted for the motion, 145, for the counter motion, 149. So the counter motion carries. So now we vote again on the counter motion, which is now the motion. So, sorry, Sheila.
So we're voting for or against now just the counter motion on its own. And so for and against is usually button 1 for and button 2 against. Yes, it is. So the vote is now open.
She wants clarification.
Moderator Scott Burton, 206. On the hub, I believe it's showing the original motion, and didn't the counter motion carry?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I don't get to always see exactly what's on the hub, so we'll just check that out. Appreciate that. What we always do when we've gone through voting for counter motions is that when we've got there, we just need to agree that this is the church, this is our decision. Are we happy with this?
Yep, Muriel.
Muriel Pearson, 429. A question. If the counter motion falls and the motion has already fallen, what are we left with?
Nothing. Nothing.
But how can the church have no position, since that's what we've been talking about?
Well, what you would then do is go back to what the position of the church was in any event. But what this is saying is a clarification of where we are. So if it's not zero, it's where we were before. We are just affirming that this General Assembly of 2025 is saying that it's that position. The position of the Church of Scotland, until we vote for that, is that we're opposed to assisted dying. This has got a nuance in it with acknowledging the diversity of sincerely held theological views. I got there.
Moderator, if I may answer Mr. Burton's question, the hub is showing the right motion. The commissioners in the hall, it will not update as precisely as those who are using it online, given the Wi-Fi nature. So I can assure you that those online are looking at the right wording.
Okay, so we are moving to a final vote. Sheila?
Thank you, Moderator. We are voting for or against. Button 1 in the hall, button 2 against, 1 for. And the vote is now open. Five seconds. The vote is now closed.
So they voted for 216, against 104. So section 4, as before us, carries. Moving to section 5, there are 2 notices of amendment. I'm wondering if the convener has seen these and is willing to accept. Yes, you are. Perhaps if we get the clerk to read them. The first is in the name of Andrew Morton.
Actually, wasn't it Eileen Miller's should have been first?
One's Eileen Miller and one's Andrew Morton.
Mm-hmm. And then we do it and. Okay, we'll go with this. This should have been the other way around. So this is Andrew Morton, and this is adding at the end of the current section 5 for all involved, including medical staff, whose ethical and moral principles should be respected.
Is this seconded? The convener's happy to accept it. Is Andrew Morton happy that the convener's happy to accept it? I think the Assembly has spoken, but you've won the day, so that's good. Does the Assembly accept, formally, do we accept this? Yes. And online as well. Excellent.
So, second amendment to the amended section 5 is to add at the end, and to support and protect potentially vulnerable groups, including those with life-limiting illnesses, disabilities, mental health issues, and dementia. And this is in the name of Eileen Miller. Is that right?
Again, the convener's happy to accept. Eileen, are you happy that the convener's happy to accept? Excellent.
Excellent.
And I should have said seconded. Seconded. The Assembly vote to accept this? And online as well? Yes. So, section 4 as amended twice over. Sorry, 5 as amended twice over. Oh, goodness. Right, okay. There's a question from Scott McInnes.
Hang on. Sorry, why has that come up? We passed it. Because we amended it. Okay, right. So the amended section 5.
Okay, a question from Scott McInnes and a comment from Andrew Gardner.
Scott McInnes, 294. It's just a question regarding the phrase robust safeguards. One of the concerns I have about assisted dying is that there are no safeguards robust enough to protect everyone, and I just wondered if the working group had thought about what that phrase robust safeguards meant, because there will always be coercion in that sense of feeling like a burden for some. And I'm just wondering what safeguards could possibly be put in place for that.
Okay, thank you. You're now seeing on the screen the whole of section 5 as amended, just to help you put it all together. So a comment from Andrew Gardner.
Thank you, Moderator. Andrew Gardner, 284. Everything that's been said has been said, Moderator. Nothing else to add.
Brilliant. Excellent. So we're voting now on section 5 as amended. That's what you're seeing in the print on the screen. Does the Assembly vote in favour? And online is in favour? Yeah. Excellent. Section 6 is in the print. Also online, yeah. Section 7, I have notice of 2 requests to speak, Douglas Hamilton and Roger Sturrock. Douglas.
Douglas Hamilton, number 52. I'm going to be brief, but I just would suggest that this deliverance actually, at the end of this, coming towards the end of this, may be the most important and the most significant for how we respond as a church going forward, where we have something very important to say and we have expertise. The debates around assisted dying, for me, highlight at the sharp end just the fear and anxiety that surrounds the issue of death in our society. There is a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, understandably, that affects debates around death. But into that context, we have good news. We have a message of hope and comfort. We are a resurrection people. We follow a risen Lord, a Lord who came to bring life in all its fullness, and said, all who believe in him shall not die, but have everlasting life. We look forward with hope to a time when death will be no more. When every tear will be wiped from their eyes, there will be no more mourning, crying, or pain, for the former things have passed away. We are not made for death, but for life. I thought about an amendment to this section, but we've had enough votes, but adding eternal life, that we have a discussion about death, dying, and eternal life. I hope we're all on board with that sentiment. Support this deliverance. I urge us all to make this the thing we take forward with renewed urgency as a church, in a spirit of hope and compassion. That we take forward a renewed drive for pastoral and practical support and care for those who are facing death imminently. But that at all times we preach life, a risen Christ who offers life, hope, a risen Christ who takes away fear and anxiety, so that whatever our legislation, the people of Scotland can face death in the light of a God who loves them, who promises to be with them through whatever they face. Thank you.
Thank you. So Roger Sturrock, who's online, and then Irene Munro.
Moderator Roger Sturrock, 173. Very briefly, just to first of all congratulate the committee in producing a really excellent report, which I felt was quite balanced, comprehensive, and as one who currently teaches second-year medical students about end-of-life issues and spirituality, we'll be looking at this report and thinking through its implications. Many medical students, young medical students, are confused about these issues as well, uncertain about their own spirituality, about end-of-life issues. And I would commend the committee to continue to recognize that open discussion on these issues is really very important. The more we talk about it, the more we listen to one another, the more we can learn from one another and go forward. And so I've been impressed, as I'm sure many others have been, with the quality of the debate this evening, the many references made to personal issues, but would commend the committee in what they've done and encourage them to continue this dialogue. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Roger. And finally, Irene Munro.
Irene Munro, 377. Thank you, moderator. As a former staff nurse who worked for 14 years in a care home, I was concerned that regarding this report 10, number 2, while provision may be made to protect the conscience of medical staff who did not wish to assist to end the life of someone, it would be more difficult to extend this to care home staff or residential staff. And if assisted dying is to be available, then obviously you have to have people who are medical and who are in the care profession who are willing to participate. And it was also concerning when the report went on to say it would be wrong to prevent someone to have an assisted death on the basis of the moral objections of others. But I would really say that it's morally wrong to insist that care home workers cannot exercise their conscience if they have no wish to be involved in the assisted dying of a resident. As the previous speaker has said, medical staff and medical students can be a bit confused about this. And so I do feel that care home staff should also have the right to exercise their conscience if they don't have any wish to be involved in assisted dying.
Okay, thank you, Irene. Convener, do you want to make any comment?
Simply that we would agree that care home staff should be able to do so. We weren't actually expressing our own opinion at that section. It was simply noting the views of others on it. But I would very much agree with what the Commissioner has just said.
Okay, so we section 7 as in on the screen in the print. Do we vote for that? And online as well. Excellent. We have a new section in the name of Anne Knox.
Affirm the understanding that suicide is not an unforgivable sin and that sensitive pastoral care of those whose lives are affected by suicide is an inherent reflection of Christ's compassion to the bereaved.
Is the convener willing to accept this? Is it seconded? Anne? Oh, excellent. Just speak briefly to it, because the convener is willing to accept.
I'm not one to keep a lady from her glass of wine, moderator, so it's very brief. I was just a wee bit concerned when I read section 8 that it referred to Augustine's position on suicide as being an unforgivable sin. And it ends the section with, even so, whilst Christian antipathy towards self-killing is primarily a post-biblical development, it is nonetheless deeply ingrained in our tradition. And I couldn't find anything that refuted that position that we hold in the church now. I know that suicide causes utter devastation to the bereaved of the person, whether it's been physical, emotional, or mental illness that has taken that person to that place where they have killed themselves. And I know that, as has been noted before, that we will be already showing Christ's compassion to those who are bereaved. I just felt that, as the report mentioned it, we had to refute Augustine's position and also to confirm, as outside agencies are going to be reading this report, confirm that we do already and will provide passionate and compassionate support to those bereaved. Thank you.
Thank you. The convener is willing to accept it. Does the General Assembly accept it? And also online. Yeah. So we move to the final section, section 8, thank and discharge the working group. And the Deliverance as a whole. So approved in the hall and online. John, can I thank you and your committee? You have done a power of work. And I know it has been hard and you have done it so thoroughly. We have had a wonderful debate this afternoon, openness and honesty, and it has been hard. And we have reached a decision, but we know it's very, very close. I mean, so we know that there is a difference of opinion within the church, but we thank you. We thank you for all the work that you have done. And go and have a rest. Thank you. That brings this session of the General Assembly to an end. I'll pronounce the benediction and then we will sing the blessing to one another. as you go from this place. May the God of love, the God of peace, the God of hope, the God of new life go with you. And the blessing of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with you now and remain with you always. Amen.
We wait for a moment in the presence of God. I'll sing this blessing through the first time. And just take a moment to let all that's been said, all that's been held by God, to sit with you as we recognize that we are all beloved children of God. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace and give you peace. Let's sing this over each other. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace and give you peace.
Thank you and good night.